Good evening. Quay Brothers here, discussing our choices for Klassiki for the upcoming month. We've chosen five evenings of films, two live-action films. The first one is Nunta di Piatra, which is The Stone Wedding by Mircea Veroi and Dan Pizza. And the second film, live-action film, is Kazimierz Kutz's Ni Woła, which is No One Is Calling.
In addition, we'll be showing three animation directors. The first is Valerian Borovchik, followed by Igor Kovalyov, and then Prit Pern from Estonia.
So to discuss the first animator, the Polish animator Valerian Borovchik, the first film we're showing, which is the Renaissance. And this was a film of object animation. He used in all his work, he used many different techniques, excelling in all of them. But with Renaissance, we see a devastated world which poignantly attempts to reassemble itself.
The second of the films is Jeu des Anges, Game of the Angels, which he made by doing some watercolors, and a friend suggested, why don't you animate them? And so what he created was a most visceral and soundscaping world that had not been seen before in this kind of animation.
The third film by Borovchik is Rosalie, which is based on a Guy de Maupassant story, in which is a monologue where the young Rosalie, played by Borovchik's wife, pleads and defends herself for the murder of her infant. Off to the side are objects arranged to convict her, as evidence to convict her. And the film ends rather mysteriously with the objects absolving her. The second animator that we've chosen is the Ukrainian-born Igor Kovalyov, who studied under the magisterial Yuri Norstein. Three films. First is Hen and His Wife. The second is Andrei Svitlowski, and the third is called Milch. The first one, Hen and His Wife, is a husband does not recognize that his wife is a hen, and only upon the arrival of a guest do things start to develop. The second film is Andrei Svitlowski, which is one of his most mysterious atmospheric films. It takes place on a Ukrainian farm. It's between a master and his two servants and the mysterious events that happen on the farm. The last film, Milch, is the story of, from a boy's perspective, observing his father's affairs. It's told completely with oblique details and is quite haunting and erotic. And the final animator is the Estonian Prit Pern, born in Tallinn. We're showing his Life Without Gabriele Ferri. This is a fairly long film. It's about the complicated love life between a husband and wife and a small child cooped up in a room.
I think what strikes us most about these three filmmakers is the unique world that they've created that could not possibly be upended by live action filmmaking. These are unique pieces solely to themselves, and I think that's what most inspires us.
The first feature film is The Stone Wedding, which is made up of two parts. Part one tells the story in beautiful, hypnotic, folklore-like images of a widow and her fatally ill daughter. There's a Romanian folk legend which says that if a young woman dies prematurely, that she's buried in her wedding dress. The second part tells the story of a deserter fleeing soldiers who are trying to capture him. He teams up with a musician who is going to a wedding. So at the wedding, we realize that the bride, that it's an arranged marriage. And during the wedding ceremony, we see that the bride becomes enchanted by the musician, and the cross-cutting between the two of them leads to her fleeing the wedding with him. The film was shot on location in a very remote mountainous region, Rossiya, Montana. And my brother and I wrote to the cameraman. Somehow we got his address.
Josip Dimian,
who was living in Australia, teaching there. And we asked him a lot of questions about the making of the film, how it worked. And he wrote back a very detailed letter. And so we'd actually like to read some of the passages because it's quite fascinating, the shoot.
Yeah, he said, I believe the discovery of the location brought a tremendous contribution to the story, to the visual style, the performances of each department. Perhaps another location would impose on us other limits and rules, would inspire us in a different way. Rossiya, Montana looked like a ghost town. In fact, the locals were hiding, not knowing who we are, what is the purpose of our visit. Most of the large houses were uninhabited, were locked up. Some of the owners managed to escape from the communist terror. 20 years earlier, others captured, jailed, or killed.
And the one element that binds the two parts is that the music was written by Doron Liviu Zaharia, completely untrained musician. And again, Josip Dimian writes about exactly what happened during the making of the film.
He said there was no music on location except the waltz used as a playback for the dance at the wedding. At that point, we had no idea how the music will sound. It was in the final stage of the post-production, after the edited version and post-sync, when Doron Liviu Zaharia, sitting on the floor in the sound studio, was watching each scene several times. He asked for a microphone and started singing or playing the flute, commenting upon the images and in his own way, telling the story through his songs. Later, he brought his friends to do the background choir and other complementary instruments. The first impression was shocking. The power of his music associated to the pictures exceeded all expectation. It sounded like a miracle. People started talking loud about an outstanding piece of cinema. The rest is history.
The final film we're showing is Nichni Woła by Kazimierz Kutz, known as No One Is Calling. The film takes place in the recovered territories of Western Poland after the Second World War. We're talking about Polish Silesia. The hero, or what seems to be a hero, is a man who has been in the Polish underground, no longer wants to kill, but he's disobeyed an order and is being hunted. He meets up with Lucina, and then a romance begins, but it is doomed.
I think that the most important thing to talk about is the cinematography of Jerzy Wojcik, who 2 years before had filmed Andrzej Wajda's Ashes and Diamonds. But here is a case where he took off in another direction, where you can see that he was pinning his two protagonists against walls or against bleak situations in the landscape. It's remarkable what he's capable of in terms of his lighting. And so I know we have a few examples to show, but I think it's what has most impressed us about both these films is this, with also Josip Dimian and Wojcik, is just the stellar camera work.
And in terms of also creating a pure scenographic space where the visuals so powerfully speak. We also should mention that there's a magnificent performance by Sofia Marcinkowska.
And lastly, I think it's very important to mention the contribution of Wojciech Kilar, the musician who one knows through a lot of Polish cinema, but this is one of his earliest, if not his first, contribution to cinema music. And the score is fantastically modern, deliberately modern in the same way that the cinematography is equal to that as well.
It's interesting too that this film, when it first came out in 1960, was terribly panned and criticized for as they said, the poison of artistry. And over the years, and we're talking now almost 60 years, it's slowly risen to a cult status.